This is the Elite Advisor Podcast. Today we're going to hang out with Tim Smith. Tim is an active advisor. Tim has gone from working at somebody else's firm to growing his own firm, leading hundreds of advisors, managing billions of dollars of assets. And even now, he is just getting started. So me and Tim are going to unpack our journeys becoming advisors, how we've discovered what type of advisor we wanted to be, so that hopefully you can reflect and decide, what do I need to do to become more the advisor that I see myself being? I love hearing how people found their way, because I think most of us at some age were like, we're not going to be selling financial products and making cold calls. That was not our dream during career day. But most advisors I know are like, this is who I am and this is what I want to do the rest of my life.
Well, I knew that I wanted a career that involved the investment business primarily, and that if I worked hard and persevered, I would achieve a level of success because I believed I had the fundamental gifts for it, the underlying abilities for it. And that was one of the things about acting that I saw. I saw people who were much better actors than I were, who were in their 30s and 40s and were still looking for their big break. And I was like, man, I don't have the patience to wait till I'm 45.
No.
You have to work for 23 years and hope I get a break eventually. And so talent and success in acting are not tied together. There's just too much luck involved. The right part, the right director, the right script. I wanted something where if I worked my ass off at it, I kind of knew I was going to do well. And this field has turned out to be that.
What would you say? Because that's one thing we, in our coaching and our podcast, that I reject, because it wasn't motivational for me to be like, hey, get in this career, cold call people for the next 20 years. And as long as you don't give up, someday you're going to make good money. And I was like, that's the worst flyer for a career you could ever write. Then I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And now we have the issue of most advisors, we're not having young advisors come in at the rate we need to for retiring advisors.
Yeah.
But somehow we're missing the mark on creating like a path and a motivational story to pull people in. And so my hope is like, hey, it doesn't have to take as long as, it might seem it takes. It's always challenging, but is there a way to put that level of effort and overcoming difficulty where you actually get results faster than maybe they're telling you it's going to take, they being the industry? So in your story, what have you learned as you've gone to say, yeah, there's the average path, which you can take and maybe just survive, but hey, here's some lessons that you can apply to hopefully get there much faster?
Well, I would say the first thing that every advisor should have is a strategic plan for themselves. So that involves looking at what you think your strengths are, your weaknesses, where your opportunities are for either, organic, naturally occurring friend and family type business versus cold calling business or, buying a practice, whatever it might be. And what the threats are. When you're early in your career, your biggest threat is you have no clients, or you lack adequate cash flow to build upon it, So, but have a plan and work with a mentor on the development of that plan. Somebody in the business for 20 years plus who has, kind of seen a lot, seen what worked, what didn't work, seen what kind of personality styles tend to do well with what kind of clients or in what business model. There are some people, for example, who are meant to be cold callers and, let's call them hunter-gatherers, okay?
Sure.
That's probably most advisors. I mean, an awful lot of advisors, they have the temerity to think that they can go out and just get a client, go out, look, cold call, whatever, ask for referrals and get clients. Then and by the way, they may or may not be terribly skillful financial planners or advisors or whatever, but they have the ability to go make rain. Then you have advisors who are terribly technically skilled as financial planners, but they're not that good at prospecting. They're not that good at bringing in clients. So that kind of a person has to really look at, okay, is cold calling a route for me? Probably not. Is buying a practice a route for me? Probably a much better one. Or being an associate in a firm where you're taking over smaller clients, let's say, just where you don't have to prospect.
Sure.
you know, so the path is really dependent upon the person's skill set from my standpoint, and strategically looking honestly at yourself, and having someone that the purpose of the mentor is having someone who will be honest with you and say, no, Tim, you're a number nerd and you shouldn't be trying to do X.
Mm,
You should be doing Y
yeah.
instead, because you're much more likely to, do well in the path, in that kind of a path instead. Because I can tell you, in the firm that I started in, it was a hunter gatherer firm. If you weren't a hunter gatherer, you just didn't survive,
Yep.
and
Yep.
you ended up, either being bounced or bouncing yourself out of the firm. So having a real and serious and objective, um, fair plan as to what strategies are you're going to put to use, because there are multiple ways to get in. You've seen a few, I've seen a few, lots of other people have seen others. There are the big firms, right? You could still go to a Merrill Lynch, try to get into a Merrill Lynch or a Morgan Stanley or something, and go through a really rigorous training program, build up some clients, and eventually leave if you want to be independent. That's
Yeah.
very painful, very hard to do, but
Oh yeah.
um, you can still do it that way, or you can join an existing firm and work your way up in that firm, private firm, independent firm of some kind. You can join an insurance agency, maybe one that has, a bent towards whatever really interests you. There are multiple paths, um, and then multiple ways to succeed once you're in one of those paths. That's all strategies and tactics, right? So um,
It does feel like
that's
the
that.
core of our business is, can you get somebody's attention, show them you have something to offer, and then get them to take action. I think to some degree, and then I know for me, communication was not a strength naturally. Just the household I grew up in, the people I was
Oh,
around.
really?
I
You
was,
seem like a good communicator here on a podcast.
and then that's where I had to
You know?
say, could I develop that skill, or is it just not for me?
Yeah,
And so I've met
yeah.
so many advisors. It's fascinating. Where I'm like, I'm surprised you're a successful advisor. Like it, whether it's your communication style is a little off, or you don't fit the stereotypical advisor that maybe when I got into business I would have said, oh, this is what the person looks like, talks like, walks like. That it was a little comforting to me to say, like, okay, there's not one way to be, like, because I don't think I'm that thing
Oh,
yet.
definitely. I can tell you there is no one way to be other than determined,
Mm,
I would say. Multiple personality styles can succeed if they're determined. But like you just said, they ultimately have to have the skill of communicating concepts, critical analysis of differences between different potential actions,
mm,
and then a call to action. This is what I think you should do, and here's why. Here's why I think this would be the best for you. Out of all these options that are out there for you, this is why I think it would be best for you. If you can't do those basic things, then the perseverance doesn't really help. But you can be kind of nerdy like me, a little number nerdy like me, or you can be gregarious and affable and everything else like an average, or a hard charging salesman type.
that's true. Yeah.
Um, they can all do well. But they have to have that some fundamental core things,
Yeah. When
as
it
you
comes
say.
to drive, tenacity, I know for me, when I look back, there was times where I was like working hard. It's like, hey, are you climbing the wall? But you realize you get to the top, you're climbing the wrong wall. And I think I look back and I was frustrated when I was like head down, trying to go a direction, but I realized I didn't know enough up front to ask the questions of like, is that really who I want to be? So I was part of a big insurance firm, and I head down, made some awards, and I realized like, wait, I don't think I want to sell insurance for the rest of my
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
Nobody really stopped me on day one and said, hey, Stan, there's 4 kinds of advisors. You get to pick which one. And I was like, that clarity would have been so helpful to know up front. Do you want to be a rainmaker closer? If so, here's the 3 skills you need. If you want to be a technical person that builds plans, here's the 3 skills you need. I do think there's an element of, a black belt is just a white belt that never gave up. But if
No, I
if
don't.
one route's going to take you 1,000 hours to be a black belt, but it's like, hey, there's another one that's going to take you 100. Neither is easy, but one can actually be accomplished more intentionally and faster.
Yeah.
I don't know if our industry is presenting that option very often.
Well, I think, it's still a very fragmented industry, and that's by design. It was a cottage industry basically when I started, especially the RIA space
Mm.
was very fragmented. It's becoming much more consolidated today than it was when I started in the industry. But uh, there, as you say, there are certain skills that have to be there fundamentally, and then everything else can kind of fit around it. But to your point, also, sometimes you don't really know what the hell you're getting into when you don't know the industry.
Yeah.
I came into I had a similar experience to you in the sense that I remember my final interview with the CEO of the firm that I joined, and all he did was talk about insurance. Um, and I was much more interested in the investment side. Now it didn't stop me from joining,
Yeah.
but it probably should have been a red flag that there was going to be an awful lot of insurance orientation coming at me. Um, and by the way, just a funny story. Like there was no coordination between the guy who recruited me and that final conversation. The stories were a mile apart.
Oh no.
And
But you were
I'm
already pot
surprised the company
committed,
was,
so you were like, it's happening.
yeah, the company was pretty damn successful considering that little small problem. But um, so I ultimately started my own company 10 years in
Mm.
as an investment advisor, an RIA firm. I went fee based in 1988 and started my own RIA in 1995.
Mm.
And part of the motivation for that was that I still felt too much emphasis on insurance in the company I had joined. When to me, insurance was something that had its place, and I placed a lot of insurance where I felt it was needed, but I never oversold it. And I never looked for a way to sell a policy where there wasn't the need for it.
Yeah.
And I sold some very big policies, most of it estate planning, because I really did believe that it was the best option. I literally would lay out Section 6166 and loans and
Mhm.
insurance as the options to, pay estate taxes. And uh, that never failed
Yeah.
because no one looking at the loans or the 6166 wanted to put their family through that when they could afford to buy the insurance now.
Yeah.
So, but that's the nerd in me.
Sure.
I had to prove it with numbers that it was going to make sense. And when people saw the numbers that their families were going to be paying,
Yeah.
um, the insurance made a lot of sense at that point. So I never oversold it. I sold a lot of it. I just never oversold it. But I also wanted to really focus on the investment business. That's what I always wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me as well, if every advisor listening is not asking about insurance, if you're saying you're doing financial planning, but you're just managing somebody's money and calling them once a year, you're not really doing financial planning. If
Sure.
you say you're a financial advisor, but the solution to every problem is an insurance policy, you're not really a financial advisor. But yeah, we bring up insurance all the time. But I appreciate the way you put it. It's like, no, we're selling it, we're not overselling it. Because at
Yeah.
different points in my career, I remember feeling that part of me inside where I'm like, it's needed, but it can't always be the solution to every problem all the time. And that's why, finding a more balanced approach, which most firms I'm working with or coaching, they're all moving in that direction where it's like, hey, we'll let you do financial planning and get paid for it, which is kind of the most emerging area of our industry to generate revenue. And hey, you can manage money, we'll give you some credit for that. And then, hey, insurance is always going to be there. But yeah, there's been periods in my career where I was like, this is way too heavy. Like it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everybody knows what feels right to them.
Mhm.
And it's hard when you've invested your career, you've put your career in the hands of other people. And it's hard to sit back and go, this might have been a mistake, or I'm not sure I'm really fitting in here. And now you got to make an exit plan of some
Yeah.
kind. Yeah, it's a big challenge. It's a very hard thing to do.
It is, yeah. And I found myself at different points holding pretty tightly. Like I started trying to shift the place I was to try to match me, and I realized I burnt some bridges, like because they're not asking for my help to change who they are. But if I can just change their system, I can stay here until I was like, oh, my season has ended. Like they're not asking for my help. Like I need to go find out where I can be more full. But at the same time, leaving is not always the option too. I've done that before. I was like, oh, this isn't a perfect fit. I'm out of here. And I look back and I'm like, oh, those problems exist anywhere I go. And so it is a very
Right.
complicated, tricky process that you probably shouldn't jump into, but also delaying it and staying miserable and not true to yourself is also not the path.
Right. Right. Yeah. And similarly to you, I've been in pretty much both places. Um, and I've only ever been with the one company or my own company.
Hmm.
My company today is a broker dealer investment advisor platform for over 100 advisors around the country. So I work with a lot of advisors also. Uh, and, you know, most of them stay for years because I think we've created a good culture and a good environment and we support them and give them what they need to do their work. Um, but, sometimes somebody comes in and in 6 months, they're like, sorry, this really wasn't what I thought I needed.
Yeah,
And I need more support or I need more of this or more of that. And I wouldn't want to be that person having just, made a change and realizing you got to make another one.
sure.
Because it's hard to change. Everybody knows the worst thing to do as an advisor is to transition your book to someplace else.
Yeah, it's very disruptive. Yeah, that I would, for most advisors we coach, it is pretty far down the list to, hey, you should leave firms or move. Like there's so much personal development, sales skills, communication skills that need to be developed that like, okay, if you're eventually going to become the person that should make that move, that will be successful in this next life, that can emotionally handle the pain you're about to cause yourself by making that transition. I think there's been times I made it too quick and I lack some wisdom in the strategy behind it. There's times I'd made that shift for the wrong reasons. And then there's sometimes I made that shift and I was like, I should have done this sooner. So I think it's there's so much to that that when I look back, I've probably done it 3 or 4 times now as I've tried to find myself in this industry. Um,
Okay.
I think there's so much that can be done where you are today that'll help you before you jump to that.
I agree. And I think, when I look back at my younger self, there are, I mean, when you're in your 20s, you really don't even understand yourself.
Yeah.
I didn't, I was a pretty, I thought, self aware person, but I didn't really
If you would have
understand.
told me that, if you would have told me that when I was 20, I would have tried to fight you, Tim. I had it all figured out.
Well, I had a father who was a philosophy teacher, so
Oh, there you go.
I came from a more contemplative background, probably. Where
Like,
I'm more thoughtful, cerebral, not quite as sure of myself, to be honest with
that's
you.
good.
Back to
Sounds
that,
healthy.
yeah. Well, yes and no. Everything has its pluses and minuses, right?
True.
So, uh, my but I think so. I hardly knew myself, and I hardly really understood. Uh, I thought I knew what I liked to do and what I didn't like to do. I thought that I knew what I wanted in life, and I had high expectations or motivations from a financial standpoint. Um, and it took years to kind of grasp that just do the right thing long term. It all works out. You'll be as successful as you can imagine, but self-development, growth, personal growth, all of those are the things you need to think about also, in addition to a good plan for yourself and hard work. Because a good plan doesn't matter if you haven't improved yourself at all, your skills, your self-awareness, things like that. So I commend you, Sten, for what you're doing for people.
Thank you. No, I enjoy it a lot. Partly, I think my story is that I didn't have it, and I would have killed for an advisor that was maybe not 30 years, 40 years older than me, making 10 million bucks. Like that felt so far away.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, I want to be that guy, but that feels so unreachable at this moment. But like, hey, is there somebody just a little bit farther ahead of me that's like, wow, I want to do? I think that feels attainable. And so hopefully, yeah, a lot of stuff we're creating is like, we know you're not where you need to be. There's a lot you need to learn, but it's doable. And for me, the
Yeah.
visual is almost like we're all driving down the road. I think some of us are our windshields are just pretty dirty, and there's an element of like, hey, I'm either going to not fly off the cliff or I'm going to actually end up where I want to go if I can clean the windshield, which a lot of is mindset, awareness, which I fought hard. Because for me, early on, it was like if you would have told me some of the stuff in my 20s, I would have said Tim is attacking me personally.
Hmm.
Um, he doesn't know who I am. My story, like the resistance would have been so strong, like it would have been
Yeah.
a fire in my body. And there's probably I could probably point to some things of where that came from, but there's just the Lord put something in me that was just, if channeled incorrectly, what was would fight you for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And it's taken me time and pain to figure out like, wait, that's still in me, and it's a good thing if I can channel it the right way,
Yeah.
um, and not let it be in the driver's seat as maybe as much as it was in the past.
Yeah. Well, I use 20 years. 10 years is probably even a decent number in terms of
Sure,
experience, but also I think it depends on what kind of firm the person has been in, what environments the person has been in, and like you, have they seen a few different environments
sure,
so they can discern differences, and in particular ones that were not evident at first.
yeah,
What are the red flags, or what are things that, gee, I wish I had known this going into it, or I overlooked it because I wanted to believe that something was going to fit. Um, so the wisdom and experience of that person are really the key things, I think, more so than how many years in the industry, or whatever it might be, the breadth of experience, and also a willingness to be frank with you, to really tell about how they see you, or how they see what you are telling them. But any coach, any mentor, has to be willing to do that to be effective.
yeah. Yeah, I think, and I wish I would have had this, but now when I hire young advisors, there's part of me inside that's hoping for it, and I'll coach them to it. But for them to come and say, "How am I doing? How do you experience me?" I was like that. I never even thought about asking people that. My idea was like, "This is who I am. You need to get better at interacting with me," as opposed to, "Hey, how do you experience me?" And so it's like it took me a long time to figure that part out of how brave are you? Because I think it's brave to go ask for somebody's feedback on and be ready for what you hear. Because once you know it, you got to do something with it. And how do you experience me? How do you think I'm doing? What can I get better at?
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of
Yeah.
people do that.
But I would argue that if I were talking to somebody with limited experience in the industry today, uh, that I would be telling them that it needs to be an attitude shift if they want to progress, because it's a lifelong learning experience. It's a lifelong, gathering of understanding of the business, the industry, the people, the players in the industry, the technologies of the industry. There are many different facets to this industry. And if people don't want to open themselves, they're only hurting themselves. It's forgive me for saying it, but it's just ego that stops us from accepting that someone might know better than we do. Right? You know what I mean?
And for me, I had to get to the point where I was like, what do I have to lose by at least listening? I may not do anything with it. I may not be to a place of maturity and humility to like to put it into action, but like, what do I have to lose by even just hearing it and receiving it? Because there was a point for me where I was like, I couldn't even do that because of what it would do to me. If your
Yeah.
any feedback was you questioning what I'm doing, my value, like it was very intense in my story until I at least got to the place where I was like, I can hear you. I'm not to a place yet where I'm going and proactively asking Tim for feedback, but if he gave it to me, I could at least sit in it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
eventually it took me a while to actually, no, I'm going and seeking it out. Like I'm going to call Tim. I'm going to pay Tim. Like whatever it takes to get the information I need to get better, I'm willing to do it.
Yeah.
And I think I use the term the forgotten asset class, which is most people investing in themselves.
Hmm.
And most advisors, and I'll say this at times, where like if you're funding your 401k or funding your Roth IRA or your HSA as a financial advisor, but you're not aggressively investing in your own development, you're missing it. Like this is a
Yeah.
100x investment. The stock market doing 8 to 12% a year. Like great, we'll get to that. If you're in your 20s and 30s, like every dollar you can put your hand on needs to be put towards speaker training, business development, coaching, like that. That's the secret sauce if you can really unlock it, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah, I completely agree that that early stage of the career, there's a tendency to get a little carried away with making a bunch of money, a lot of commissions or whatever, a lot of fees,
Sure.
and thinking, "Oh, I can coast now." The hard work's over, right?
Yep.
And the hard work has really just begun if you wanna optimize what you can be in life.
That's
This
good.
is life stuff. This isn't even industry stuff, really, because you're gonna all of this affects your marriage if you get married one day. It all affects how you raise children if you have children one day. Are you going to teach your children to be people that are open, thirsty for knowledge and learning and experience? Or are you going to teach them that they already know it all
Mm,
and they don't need anybody? And then what are they going to be when they get older? They're not going to be growing. They're not going to be growth oriented.
mm.
And I can tell you, at my age, I am growing now faster than I probably have in the last 20 years or so.
Nice.
I'm really excited with where I'm at, what the work that I'm doing, some different things that I'm doing, and I've I've been more energized than I was probably when I was in my 40s by what I'm doing. Because I think in my 40s it was the usual. You're just trying to grow, just grow, 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 and but not something that is you're uniquely capable of. There's a coach, not to talk about other coaches, then, but there's a
No,
coach.
good.
I won't name him, but his whole thing is about um, focusing on what is your unique skill that really, really sets you apart, and emphasizing that your time is best spent doing that. So, as an example, to go back to the hunter gatherers shouldn't spend their time developing financial plans for people.
Yeah,
They can do financial planning, but they should hire somebody to crunch the numbers and, take all the data in and everything else. And they should be doing the review of the plan, the presentation of the plan, the implementation of the plan, the management of the money, if that's what they want to do, or outsourcing the money management, because money management is largely a commodity anyway.
sure.
And so, if you can just go gather assets and put it with third parties who can manage it extremely well and are just focused on that, spend your time gathering money. So, figuring out what is your unique thing, that's a hard thing. And that's where a great coach can come into play also,
Yeah,
helping you focus on identifying what is a skill that you really have that's beyond, and that would and then monetizing that,
that's good.
really building a plan around that as to how you will monetize that skill. um, and by the way, that's fun stuff from my standpoint. I love strategy and talking to younger advisors about all this kind of stuff. Also, it's one of the benefits of age and wisdom
There you
is
go.
you can see it faster than most people, I think. Faster than the young people themselves would see it,
Yeah.
you know.
So at this stage, what's your biggest place of resistance you're hitting? Like obviously you've learned lessons, you've had a lot of success, but you said you're fired up more than ever. Like what's the challenge you're taking on? What's the tension you're having to sit in? Biggest lesson you're
Yeah, the
learning?
challenge here's the challenge I'm taking on. I've created something in the investment world that's it's sort of like structured notes, but it's a little more advanced, and I think I can market it to family offices and very wealthy people.
Nice.
I've never really gone after those markets in my whole career. I've worked with just high net worth, so $2 to $10 million type clients has been most of my thing. Now, what I want to do is have a $20 million minimum, and go after pensions, foundations, and ultra high net worth. And so, you know, I'd like to have $1 billion under management personally with 20 clients in 5 years.
That's great.
That's a great challenge.
Yeah, that's a bold goal. I
Um,
like it.
but that's a big fat hairy goal right there.
It is.
Uh, and to somebody who's at Merrill Lynch and has 3 billion under management, that doesn't sound like much, right? But when when you've run a company for 30 years like I have and haven't marketed for clients really, clients came to me, just referrals and stuff, but I have not developed a plan and gone headlong at the market to attack a market with something. It's the most fun,
That's great.
exciting, uh, energizing thing I've done in a long time because in a way, I feel like I'm starting over um, with now with all the wisdom and knowledge that I
Nice.
didn't have when I was.
Now you're ready. Now you're ready to go out there.
Yeah, I'm finally ready. Ready to make a career out of this damn thing.
I love it.
Um, yeah, so that's what's going on for me right now, and it's fun and exciting, and it the whole thing suits me well because it is very number oriented. It's very mathematical what I'm doing, um, and it involves options and some other stuff, and it's just really different from what most advisors would talk to people about.
Nice.
So it's exciting, and I'm at the best point in my career. I people say to me, like friends of mine say to me, "You going to retire, Tim?" I'm like, man, I'm at the peak of everything I am. Why
Nice.
the hell would I give it all up now? Especially, I'm high energy. My father lived into his 90s. My mother is now 90. I expect longevity. By the way, my father worked till he was 87. I don't know why I would stop. Like, I do everything. I have the time to do everything with my life that I want to do. So I don't know why I would stop doing this. It's the most fun, the most exciting. No desire to cut back at all.